Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. In today's episode, I talk to Dr. Ileana Hatton. Ileana holds a PhD in both clinical psychology and philosophy, with over 15 years' experience working as a clinical psychologist. Her career has seen her support victims of crime, those in remote and rural areas, patients in the Australian public healthcare system, and included 3 missions with Doctors Without Borders, where she worked with survivors of conflict in the Middle East and Africa. She's currently running women's workshops centered around breaking trauma cycles. Her own personal journey has seen her overcome stage 4 endometriosis to conceive 2 children naturally with no intervention. In this episode, we talk about the psychological methods Ileana used to help her overcome her endometriosis. We'll talk breath work and connecting with your body as a gateway to connecting with your intuition, all things vital to the maternal metamorphosis. And we delve into intergenerational trauma and her work with internal family systems. Ileana, thank you so much for your time today. It's fantastic to have you here with us.
So lovely to be here, Tammy. Been looking forward to it.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation as well. You have such an amazing story when it comes to your own fertility and conception journey. And if it's okay with you, I'd really like to start there and talk about how this influenced you to start your workshops, which are centered around helping women explore their patterning and trauma triggers before or soon after birth.
Yeah, sure. So yes, it's a long story, so I won't go into all of it, but I was diagnosed quite early with endometriosis, and it has formed, I feel like we all get really drawn into whatever it is that we're also going through. I feel like it has formed a massive part of how I've come to practice and what kind of people also drawn to do the same work. It was like a starting point, and I feel like the biggest message that I take from what I went through is that disease is our body's message system to us. I feel like it's a gift. I don't want to go so far. Obviously, people have extreme suffering in any disease that's happening, but I feel like it's also what points us in the direction of what is our body telling us. What is it? There's a reason that that's coming up, and I feel like that for some reason became really clear to me very early on. I started symptoms when I was 16, maybe 15 years old. I can't remember when I got my period now. And straight away, there was this obvious symptom that something's really wrong. I was getting extreme pain. I couldn't move for 1 to 2 days. It got worse over time. In bed, vomiting, like diarrhea. I'm sure everyone's happy to hear the details, but like I'm a real believer in being very transparent. Like, it was a horrible experience of having my period every single month. And early on, I just somehow something in me told me, don't go down the path of like regular conventional medicine. Obviously, the most usual that a GP will say is you start birth control, or sometimes they even go as far as surgery pretty early on. Something told me not to do that. So I feel like I took a very strong stance. I've never taken the pill in my life. I've just felt drawn to try to work out, where is this coming from? And that kind of led to a lifelong, up to now, journey, still ongoing, to work out what's going on there. And I feel like I've really come a long way in that. Like, there's still more to do, but I started looking into Chinese medicine, naturopathy, the use of food for health, for healing, And then with my psychology, I started turning to psychological methods. And it's been like many stages, but I now am completely symptom free. I have 2 kids, gorgeous kids who are like, I birthed naturally, I conceived naturally. I don't have any endometrial symptoms. Like, as far as I can tell, I'm in kind of remission, if there's such a thing. I feel like, I guess through that experience, I can then offer something back to anybody that's in a similar position.
You mentioned psychology methods through your work that you do and all of the study that you've done, and that you've used some of your own psychology methods to help with this. Can we talk to that a little bit, please? Because that sounds very interesting to me.
You have such good intuition. Like, seriously, you're just right. You're so on point. So the place that I started with, that I think is such a deep method, is I started to actually speak to my womb. That's where it's like developing a relationship. I didn't come from any particular study, or maybe I heard something somewhere, but I just had the intuition to try to hold that place and try to give a message that I felt was needed. So I used to just hold the area that was hurting and say, I'm so sorry you're hurting. I'm with you. I'm holding you. Like, there was kind of, it was like speaking to the part of me that was holding the pain. And that I noticed almost immediately. It didn't take everything away, but there was like a calming down inside. Something in me could take in that message, and it was just the presence. Like, I think that is about the parts of ourselves that when we are in disease, we kind of shut off from because it's too painful. But when we come back into connection and even just giving attention, something changes, because it's like it's being seen, it's being listened to.
And I think you can apply that to everything when it comes to healing, whether it's disease or whether it's emotional pain that's been stuck in our bodies for a long time. When you speak to it and let those feelings, I don't know, be heard, I suppose, then it starts the process of the healing and the body letting go of that. I don't know. That's been my experience. So what you're speaking to is very, very similar to, I guess, some of the practices in my own healing journey that I've been on. So when you're talking to this, I'm like, yeah, I totally understand that. But you've mentioned intuition here, and I feel like you hear the saying, especially when it comes to the maternal metamorphosis. Women are meant to just know how to trust their intuition and listen to your body, and your body will tell you. And this is fantastic advice. Trust me, I think this is amazing advice. But the problem I see with it in the modern world is that so many people are disconnected from their bodies. You have to be able to sit in your body and be connected with your body in order to be able to connect with your intuition. How would you then approach connecting to your body in order to help you connect to your intuition? Because I know that in your practice and in your teachings, this is part of what you do. So can you talk about how you would go about that process?
Totally. And look, that is such an important thing to presence as well, is that it's not a problem with our ability to do that, but actually it has almost been that general impact of the patriarchy, the patriarchal system, that it takes away the knowing. Not to go into that too deeply, but it's like our intuition doesn't have space, and to the extent of it's not given attention. I'm kind of holding myself back from saying, I'd go so far as even saying it was forced out of us in a way, or we're forced away from it. Like, we are systematically disconnected from our body in so many ways. Like, that has been taken away by the system when it became really medicalized. And so it's not weird that we're doing that. Of course, we're in this space now. But the good news is that I believe that that is always there. I believe that intuition, the ability, like there's always a spark there within us. We know when we're in touch with that. And it's just, how do you find the way back? I think that's where being held by somebody else in a space where you can go within, that's really important. I think it's often hard. We're so isolated now. The mothering experience, the birthing experience, even the pregnancy experience can be so isolating. We are not in tribe anymore. We are doing it one by one in these rooms. Like it's become hugely disconnected, just the whole process. And so we've become disconnected. But there is a knowing inside us. I think I can talk about my second birth, which was just such an transformative, like I can't describe this experience. It was just beautiful, where I had a friend who was a doula who held space for me in that way. And it just flowed and it felt like this is right. There was an ability to relax into the process rather than feel like, have you done this? Have you hit this yet? What's going on now? Or we better get something in, check you for people around that you don't know, or whatever the process is. It's not our natural space where we're going to let down in that environment. But we do know when it feels more right, we can connect back in. So I think, yes, like you said, going back to the body in any way that we can, going back to tribe, to circle, to women. When we're together, there's often a stronger bond, which I think it gets stronger. We help each other, just women sitting together. And there's also some practices, like if people are interested to try out different things, there's practices that kind of help you connect in as well. Dance practices, singing practices, movement, somatic work. There's lots of things that lead us back there, like lots of paths to the same place.
Can we talk to the somatic practices a little bit, if that's okay? Because it's one of those things that just keeps, I don't know, appearing in my life. So I'd like to, this is personal interest, so I'm using a bit of this time as personal interest time, but I keep hearing about it. And obviously there's something pulling me in that direction, but I don't know much about it. So can we talk a little bit, like, what are somatic practices? When you say somatic practices, what does that mean? What are you referring to?
If you hear something 3 times, it means that it's a sign for you to go in that direction. Look, I will say I'm not a somatic therapist, so I want to have a disclaimer, because I always say I want to be really clear about what is like my specialty and not my specialty. I'm not a somatic practitioner, let's say, so I can't talk. There's so much range that I would not know about. All kinds of movement practices and particular exercises to switch on vagal nerve, all the nervous system stuff. So I can't speak to that. That's definitely, you want to find like a somatic therapist that would go into that. But I guess when I talk about somatic work, it's like just bringing the body into focus. I studied Hakomi therapy. I'm not a practitioner. I didn't complete the full certification, but I've been in therapy myself with a Hakomi therapist for 8 to 10 years. So I feel like I know the practice a bit from the inside. And it really is like a study of the body, like just going inwards, in a sense, bringing attention to whatever it is. It can be as simple as just noticing, if you scan your body now, like there may be one particular sensation, emotion, a pain or a tension somewhere, a pulling. I just had a session recently where once I started to study what was happening in the moment, there was a strong feeling of like my head wanting to pull to one side. And it's just exploring that, like just slowing down, starting to pay attention in this really deeper way to what is happening there. And this is, again, goes back to intuition. Everything's like a network, like a spider web linking back in. This is our intuition. This is what points us. When we follow that, you notice the most miraculous unfolding of people's intuition. Like it's all already there. All the answers of everything that we want to know is sitting already inside of us. It's just, can we make space and listen to that? And it will unfold itself. We don't even have to do anything. A lot of Hakomi work, if you were standing outside my therapy room, is silence. There's no talking in a lot of my therapy. It is the person going inwards to discover what their own body is trying to let them know. And I always say, your body will tell you once or twice or 3 times, gently, softly, until it starts to ramp it up. And if we don't listen, that's when we kind of eventually get the hammer at the head, which is now you have a full-blown thyroid problem, endocrine problem, whatever, endometriosis, PCOS. Like our body was already sending us signals probably long before we ever get to this point of chronic health stuff. It's just that we don't pay attention. We just kind of get on with it, drink another coffee, keep moving, keep pushing, do the thing, get it done, deadline on it. And suddenly then we find ourselves, well, like this has now really hit a brick wall. But the body was already informing us like way, way before.
I think that kind of comes back to getting disconnected from our bodies. So in terms of our modern world, when we are really disconnected from our bodies and being able to tap into intuition, I mean, you've mentioned singing, you've mentioned dancing. I've just said training for me, meditation. Some people run, some people do yoga. Are those the kind of practices that you're talking about that put you into that state of being able to connect to your intuition?
Yes, like the thing is, it could be anything. Like these are practices that are kind of directed there, and we could mention like 20 more, but it's exactly like you said. When you train, it's about where is your attention. You can be in deep connection with your body when you're washing the dishes,
gardening,
like yeah, anything. It's
okay,
where is your attention? And this is one of the fundamental mistakes we make, is that we think that our mind is the same thing as our attention. I have a teacher in Balmain that does acuenergetics, which is an amazing practice as well. And he says a very helpful kind of story around that. He's like, if I drop a brick on your foot, you will very quickly not be in your thoughts anymore. But your attention is in your body. Our mind and our thoughts are not the same thing as our attention. So we can choose to put our attention in our body whenever we want, or on ourself, or our intuition whenever we want. It's just a matter of shifting focus. And things like dancing, singing, ice baths, sauna, tapping, it's just that they are allowing us to drop in there. And it might be more obvious how your body's feeling when you're sitting in an ice bath. Your attention is very much on how you're feeling and probably not what you're thinking. But you don't have to do those more extreme, or even a practice. It can just be bringing attention back to your body, or to a part of your body, or to your breath. And meditation gets I think it's become like a bit of a worn out concept now, where people go, meditation, I have to go and sit down. And for so many of us, that's hard to do. And then we kind of don't do it. But you can be meditating when you're changing the TV channel, as long as you put your attention in your hand and how the remote controllers feels, like you're already doing it.
Interesting. It's interesting. When you mention those type of things, I know I'm going to bring it back to meditation again, and also a bit of that yogic practice, right? So, because there is that yogic practice
it's
of
really good.
Whatever you are doing, no matter what you're doing, you have to be intentional and present in what you're doing. And even how does my meditation teacher, like, you can focus on one thing. Let's say I'm focusing on my glass of water and I focus on the glassiness of it. And because I've got sparkling water in there at the moment and the lemon, and focus on the bubbliness of the water inside it and what that would feel like being inside the glassiness. I know this is going, but that's kind of what he's talking about.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
like you really, or like,
Present.
anyway, so we're getting a bit sidetracked here. But when it comes to pregnancy, and you just mentioned breath and breathing, you can't actually get past pregnancy without breath and breathing being mentioned, especially when it comes to birth, or like more specifically when it comes to birth. You literally can't get past breathing and how important it is. But we also know how the fight, flight, freezing responses affects the musculature that controls your breathing patterns. And I read somewhere that trauma can affect this as well, or more specifically, traumatized parts are frozen in these muscles. Can we talk about this a little bit? And do you have any breathing techniques that you might be able to share?
Sure. You know what? Like, I'm going to be a total renegade here and say, I want to say breathing is important and also not. I'm going to go out on a limb because I just feel like, okay, in general, we're all not breathing deeply enough, let's say. Life is so stressful and we can all benefit from breathing more slowly and deeply. Like, that's pretty much it. There's lots of breath practices, and I want to be fair that some people, it will be the absolute thing that just boosts them and holds them while they're birthing. And I will say, for me, it was just nothing. It was not anything important. And in fact, in my first birth, I'll go so far as saying it almost made it more difficult. So I'll have to explain myself. Basically, in my first birth, I was so wanting home birth for both of my children. And I did everything. I went to classes. I did the full programs, training, hypno, birthing, breathing, everything. Like the true underlying perfectionistic overcompensator part of me, that I like to call her, just got so on top of it. And I'd done years of this. I'd done Vipassana 10-day retreats where I'd sat and just focused on breath for hours after hours after hours. I was so good at that practice. And when I got into the birth, unfortunately, the baby's head got stuck. I was in my house laboring for, like, pre-labor for over 3 days by myself, like with my partner, but no other practitioner. And the breathing, it's like I got so much in my head about how I had to breathe that it was almost detracting from me. I was getting so worried about, am I breathing right? Slow breathing. I was in my head. And what I realized the second time was that just did not work for me whatsoever. And what worked instead, so I'll kind of like go a slightly different route. It's not to take away from breathing. I think breathing is really important, but I don't think it's for everyone. And the thing that I found in the second time was that it was more like opening my jaw. There is stuff around the mouth, which immediately has an effect on the pelvic. I'm sure you are such an expert in this area, but immediately like relaxes the pelvis, and making noise. Like, this for me was far more helpful to like grunt and like really get into this more animal kind of thing, or humming maybe as well, yeah, or singing like that. I don't even remember how I breathed. It didn't matter. Like, the breathing will happen whether you want it or not. It's going to happen. But it was like, yeah, something around the sounding for me was so powerful. So I hope it's not too detracting, but I also just want to open up this space where breathing is not everything. Like for me, it was way too cognitive. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. I was in my head and I didn't want to be. It doesn't help to be in your head when you're trying to go through transition. You have to go into like this, or I did have to go into this other space, like this more animal, primal kind of. Animals don't control their breathing. Like they just, yeah, it just happens. So yeah, like both, right? It can or it can't be sometimes the best thing.
In terms of the fight, flight, and freeze response, do you know much about how that controls breathing pattern and how trauma can affect this as well and can freeze the muscles? Can we talk about that? Because I've heard stories of women who have panic attacks during birth, and obviously that's going to activate the fight, flight, or freeze response. And then from what I've read would then affect the musculature that controls your breathing. And as you just, there is a direct link between your jaw and your pelvic floor. Dr. Angela James, who I've spoken to and had a very long relationship with, she said, open jaw, open floor. Like as in open your jaw, open your pelvic floor. That's kind of like the link there, right? But I'd really love to know a little bit more about how traumatized parts are frozen in those muscles?
It's a really good question. I think if you think about the fight flight response, that is, you are going into shallow breathing. The blood is being redirected to the places that need it, right? So away from the brain, away from the stomach, and to the limbs, so that you can basically fight, run away, or if neither is available, you kind of freeze. But I think in terms of how trauma affects biology, it is really intricate. I mean, we can talk also about epigenetics and how like the transfer of trauma, not just the trauma that we experience in our own lives, but we also now understand that we carry DNA from our parents' traumas and what they've been through. So there is examples in research of if a parent has been through, let's say, a war experience, even early in their life, before they got pregnant, the child can carry the epigenetic tag in their non-coding DNA, which is the majority of our DNA, so not chromosomal, but the rest of the DNA. So they can also have, let's say, startle responses, bodily responses to like all kinds of things that even though they haven't experienced that themselves. So I feel like the way in which we carry that, it's almost like a memory in the muscles, in the organs. I mean, I feel like I haven't studied enough, but I would be open to the idea that we could carry things in so many ways in our body, and not just the things that we've experienced, but we actually, like our DNA hands that down to us, the experiences of our ancestors as well. So, I mean, in terms of breathing and does it contract the muscles? Yes. You know, like if you breathe long enough, what we know, like if you breathe in a hyperventilating kind of short, shallow way in the chest, what we know over time is that the muscles around the shoulders start to shorten because the body gets so used to this smaller amount. We're not training our body in this different breath. So we train it into contracting in that area. People get more headaches. Like whatever we do with the body is going to have an effect. But I think it's larger than that. I think that we carry memory in our bodies, and that can come up at certain times more than others, even like certain ages. I've seen suddenly something somebody never had, suddenly they're having sensations or particular emotional responses that never appeared before. So it's really deep. Like, I don't think I understand the depth of how we carry stuff in our bodies. Yeah.
So I guess you've kind of opened up the door, I would say, to our next question. When it comes to pregnancy, birth and motherhood, you can't really get past the fact that this period, whether we're conscious of it or not, can bring up a lot of stuff from our own childhood, the experience of being parented. And that even ventures into that intergenerational waters that you were just speaking about. So I don't know much about internal family systems, which you work with. Can we talk a little bit, I guess, first to the fact that pregnancy, birth, and motherhood does bring up a lot from our own experiences of being parented, childhood, intergenerational trauma, and then maybe talk a little bit about internal family systems.
Sure. So intergenerational trauma is something that 80s, 90s, there was a lot of research, especially New York, I think Mount Sinai Hospital, by a very famous researcher called Rachel Yehuda. She studied a lot of groups of Holocaust survivors and their children, and looking at particularly like how even when there hadn't been any formal discussion or sharing of the experiences of the Holocaust survivors, the children were showing patterns or having particular responses to things that could only be described as a repetition of what their ancestors had gone through, or the people that had gone through the Holocaust had gone through. And what they found was when they looked at the DNA, there was this big understanding or explosion of research into understanding that actually all the traits and the things we think are handed down, like hair color, skin color, eye color, all the things that we know we inherit, which are chromosomal kind of traits, that only accounts for less than 2% actually of the DNA that we inherit. And the majority of the DNA is actually what they call non-coding DNA, which is all about the environmental factors. So the idea here was that the stresses that the parents or grandparents of children went through was being encoded in a way that, in a very simplified term, either like switches on or activates a gene or silences it. So we know that we kind of carry stuff down from our parents, but whether or not that will be expressed is very much depending on chemical factors and environmental factors. So the chemicals, like what was found was that was actually switching on the chemical that would either activate or silence a gene. So if they'd been through stress, there'd be a particular epigenetic tag, they call it. So the upshot of that is that we don't just carry like whether or not we're going to have blue eyes, but we carry both what she called like the resilience factors. So like the coping strategies, the skills that our ancestors developed and how they survived. We kind of carry that somehow kind of inbuilt in us, which is the positive side. And I guess we also carry like the difficulty, the stress response, like how we're going to respond to things. So that is kind of a general idea of where the idea of intergenerational trauma comes from. I guess what the good news about it is that if we then have an experience where we're able to have a more positive, let's say less stressful life experience, that can reverse it for our children. And also they don't know whether it lasts more than 2 or 3 generations. So after the 3rd generation would be that the effect drops off. But they did show it for up to 3 generations of children. And so what that kind of says, or what I like to take from it, is that when we do the work, when we show up and say, do our own internal processing and deal with the stuff here in this lifetime, we have the potential to affect 3 generations of our offspring, what's going to come next. And I think that's really powerful, that we're not just even doing it for ourselves, but it has a flow-on effect for what we do in our time as well. So yeah, and in terms of internal family systems, I mean, this is one way to work. It's not the only way that I work. It's just an area that I find is really helpful to get a clarity on kind of how do we work with this within ourselves. The thing I like about it is that it talks about parts. Ron Kurtz, the guy that developed this way of working, he says we don't have this one-dimensional psyche. We're not one mind, unilateral, just that's it. Like we are multifaceted. We have so many different parts of us, and often those parts are in conflict. One part of us wants to go and take over, or very ambitious or whatever. Another part might be very down to earth, not really, has other values. And often we get really caught up and stuck when our parts are in conflict with each other, and we don't know how to make sense of that, and so we just stay in this kind of back and forth. And so I love how he gives space to both. They're both true. They're both needing attention. They're both parts of you that want to communicate different things. And we don't have to simplify it and try and pick the one or get rid of one. Like they're all welcome. And so I just like that way of working because I find people resonate with it so easily. And it gives a really clear, it's like having your little parts around, like they're going to pop up at different times, the anxious one or the really full-on boss lady one, like they're just parts, and we can start to relate to them like these beautiful elements of our bigger self.
So that would, I guess, mean that you need to embrace all parts rather than trying to make them all fit together. So you just have to embrace them all and understand that they're all perfectly part of who you are. I'm just trying to process this while we're talking. So would that be right?
It's a bit more like a lot of our parts are defense. They had to get into positions to help us. Yeah. So he calls different parts like protectors, for example. And what happens to our parts, like if we think about as a child, all of our parts were there, but then depending on what our experience was, some parts had to kind of take on roles and responsibilities to try to help us get through life in the best way possible. So what happens is that our parts, our organic, natural parts, kind of get burdened with particular roles. So let's talk about the very common one of like the perfectionist kind of part. There's that part became perfectionistic as a way to try to cope with something that was going on, where being perfect may have gotten more approval, more love, may have given them more attention from their parents. And so that part took on this kind of extra role to try to get the needs met of the child. And so what happens in therapy is that these parts are welcomed and invited, and then invited also to unburden themselves from the role that they had to take on in that environment. And what happens for those parts is that then they transform back into what was their original reason, like what was the original part before it took on this extra role to try to protect. And so then it's like allowing the part to really become its more instinctual self. But the parts they don't all meld in. They're just these different aspects of ourselves that we want to give a chance to be who they really want to be.
So when it comes to pregnancy, birth, motherhood, how does that fit in, and all the changes that you're going through with that, how does that fit in with what you're then saying?
It relates to everyone, but in the mothering experience, I think the place that it touches into is when we do go into our mothering role, like the way in which we've learned to do that and the coping strategies that we have to do that are often influenced by these parts. they become more apparent because the children kind of bring them more to the surface. Let's say, what do you do under stress? I can speak from personal experience, like really pressing on like this button in you. There's going to be a way that we've learned, one of our parts learned to protect us in this situation. That could be yelling back and screaming and trying to kind of get space like that, or it could be becoming overly permissive. And so what it allows, I think, is for mothers to look at the roles that they find themselves often falling into under this extra responsibility, under this extra stress. And again, giving them space so that they can really feel themselves again. Because I feel like that's the bit that gets lost. And this is what the workshop is a lot about. Is it's called Breaking Trauma Cycles, but then the second part is meeting the wild woman. I feel like the part that gets missed often in mothering in our modern day is that the mother gets lost. The woman that became a mother gets lost, and it's kind of coming back to her instinctual nature. Where is she? How is she? Where are her needs? Where are her spaces for herself, her parts that don't maybe get a lot of airtime when she's stuck kind of in the role and under all the load? And that makes us better people. I mean, whether it's a mother or whether it's a friend, or we just, when we're feeling free and connected to our own intuition, we just flow better in all relationship. So it's that, but it's for everyone, really.
That's such a beautiful explanation. Really, it really is. And I guess when it comes to our physical state, it's really directly connected to our emotional state. Can we talk a little bit about the intersection between body and mind?
Sure. That's such an interesting space. Yes, intersection. And it's like again, like with the rise of kind of industrialism, and when things shifted over into the patriarchal system, it was also like a split, wasn't it, between mind and body, or seeing things as separate, but they're interconnected, like deeply interconnected. So how do we hold all that? Like one influences the other.
I've got one other question that I wanted to ask you, and that's, what's the one thing that you wish all women knew before having a baby?
What's the one thing? It's interesting because you said mind and body. I feel like so drawn to say it's not necessarily what they know, but it's one thing that I wish women felt like before having a baby, or when they're having a baby, is that to feel like deeply seen and understood and held in that space. And I feel like that is, I know it's such a big ask, like that's not necessarily what our world is looking like right now, but if there was that more compassionate language and system that was present, I feel like that experience would just be so much more magical for everyone, which it should be, or it can be. So it's a feeling. I'm really coming back to the to emotions and body again, but I wish that they felt that sense of being really deeply seen and held.
And how would you go about creating that? I mean, but like you're saying, it's a pretty big ask, especially in such a medicalized event as it's become these days. How can women create that environment for themselves?
Well, I think it's like what you're doing is that we're having these conversations, and we're doing it, and we're talking about how it can come about. And I think everything comes in cycles, and the medical system is, I mean, I just came out of working in the medical system 2 years ago. It's breaking down because it doesn't work well. Like there are so many things that are becoming more and more apparent that this isn't sustainable or effective or economical, like the way that we're operating right now. And so I do believe that maybe one thing falls, another one might be able to be built. And having these conversations, meeting in group, women coming together. There's amazing women that I've seen on Instagram doing incredible like circle work and womb work, and women sitting together around fire, around or in tribe, wherever they can gather together. I feel like that's already, it's happening. It is happening. It's around. People are holding space for that. And many doulas, midwives I know practicing with home birthing and privately are bringing that. I feel there is a movement. There's a movement happening where there's more and more awareness and more connecting back to intuition. So we just continue.
Yes, we just continue. We continue to try and get back to the types of things that women used to do. I think when it comes to birthing, and when you look at the history of birthing, it's very, very interesting to see how we've come away from what it used to be. And trust me, there are some really, really good aspects of that in terms of like women are surviving, babies are surviving. We cannot take away from that side of things. But I think there is also, in making sure that everyone survives, I think it's become a lot more centered on the baby, less centered on the mum, about their experience, all that type of thing. So I think what you're saying is definitely correct. And I feel like there's got to be some happy medium that's kind of somewhere in the middle of all of that. But I don't know where that is. That's not my area of expertise. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been such an enlightening conversation.
Oh, you're such a pleasure to be with.
And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you, because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode, or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process. For those currently in their conception or pregnancy journey, you can actually apply to join my complimentary but private community, the Preggy Training Crew. And you'll find my community application and social media links in the episode description. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I absolutely encourage you to share it with other women just like you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.